So I will say that the award-winning answer I got in my conversation that I just had is I get out of bed in the morning because my wife tells me she needs to make the bed. So I will say that was a very good answer. I get out of bed for a lot of things. First of all, it really is, I try to make it a moment of gratitude as I'm getting out of bed and just thinking about the blessings in my life, whether it's my family, my wife Marcy. I have two adult children who I evidently still get to parent, even in their 20s. So many beautiful friends and colleagues and family members. So there's certainly a lot to get out of bed for in the morning. But professionally, I get out of bed actually for the same reason that I've been getting out of bed for many, many years. The opportunity to build community, to build relationships, and to seek holiness. Now, in my current role, I get to do that with 1,600 rabbis who work all around the world in various spaces, in congregations, in chaplaincy spaces, hospitals, or senior homes. They work as educators, they work as community rabbis, they work in so many amazing spaces here in North America, but also hundreds of our colleagues who live in Israel, in Europe, in Latin America, in Australia, in just all sorts of different places all around the world, teaching Torah and engaging people in community. I also have the joy of working with a network of 560 congregations like Temple Israel, all across North America. Some very small, some of them having thousands of member units of households. And overall, our movement has impact on over 2 million Jews and Jewish adjacent people all over the world. And that's a beautiful thing to wake up to every morning, to think about how our organizations, the Rabbinical Assembly, United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism, together with other partners, can really create that impact, and it's that impact I want to speak about today. The verse that comes to mind when I think about my work is a verse that Rabbi Schweber actually spoke about this morning when he introduced the reading. Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Make for me a sanctuary, a mikdash, v'shachanti, and God says, I will dwell b'tocham, among them. Now, I need a little help here. I want you to be like Rashi or many of our Mefarshim, many of our commentators. What's wrong with the verse? Yes. Right? Beautiful. Right? Good, right. And it's not just an issue of number, right? It's also, what are we referring to? Normally, when you build something, if I build a house, I expect to dwell in that house. V'shachanti b'tocho. So we would expect the verse to say, make me a mikdash, a holy sanctuary, a space to dwell in, and I will, God should say, dwell in that house. And yet it says b'tocham, within them. So I want to offer three possibilities about how we might understand the verse. The first is, and of course, we're going to know that that's not really the possibility, but we're going to go with it for a minute. The first is there's a typo in the Torah. It should actually say bitocho, and instead it says bitocham. And in fact, it's a reading that's possible because I don't want to be the spoiler here, but if you go 5 weeks from now, when we read towards the end of the book, at the very end of the book of Shemot, of Exodus, actually the description is that they finished building the Mikdash. And in fact, it says that God's Spirit fills the tent. In fact, it fills it so intensely that Moshe and Aaron can't actually go inside. So it's very interesting that we have this bitocham, I will dwell among them, and yet actually when the story ends, completes the cycle of the building of the Mishkan, that actually it really is God coming and dwelling inside the tent. That's just an interesting puzzle. But let's just say, because rabbis are supposed to never acknowledge there might be a typo or something like that in the Torah, so let's come back to this idea of bitocham. So then what's the next question? I will dwell among them. What does that mean? Right? Who's the them? Okay, so it's possible that it's Bnei Yisrael, that it's the people. And in fact, if you noticed in the Haftarah, the very last words of the Haftarah this morning, There's this beautiful line where God, after the building of the Beit HaMikdash, Solomon's temple, it actually says, I will dwell, if you fulfill the mitzvot of building the Beit HaMikdash and all the other mitzvot that I've given you in the Torah, I will dwell among Bnei Yisrael. Also, by the way, again, a spoiler alert, if we look forward to the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, so part of the opening is how the Israelites encamped in the desert. And it's really beautiful. The Mishkan is right in the middle, and there are 3 tribes on each side of the Mishkan. So it's this beautiful idea that actually the life of the Israelites, as they go through the Midbar, they go through the desert, God is actually in the center. The Mikdash is in the center, God is in the Mikdash, and therefore God actually literally dwells among Bnei Yisrael, physically because they are arrayed as they are camped with God in the center. I think about that, by the way, when I think about Mordechai Kaplan, Rabbi Mordechai Kaplan of blessed memory, the founder of Reconstructionism, but also a very good Masorti conservative Jew, who thought of the synagogue as a Jewish center. I love that term, actually, to think about a synagogue as a center for Jewish life, a center for Judaism. Just imagine our communities literally living around the synagogue, as is in some ways the case here in Great Neck. And now I want to introduce a third idea, which is that the them, bitocham, of the verse could be about the people who build the Mishkan. Build for me, create for me a mikdash, and I will dwell among them. Among who? The ones who are building it. That in the act of creating, whether it's the mikdash, this holy space, or just the act of coming together as a community to build Jewish life, the life in those days of the Israelites in the desert, in our day, building synagogue life, Jewish life, community life, we ourselves have the possibility of encountering God's presence and having it dwell among us. It's a beautiful idea, and actually that's what I see happening all the time. I first experienced it when I was a teenager, and I was in USY, and I was Religion Education Vice President. And I had the opportunity, I didn't really understand its power at the time, but I had the opportunity to start teaching people to read Torah or to strengthen their skills so they might lead davening, for other teenagers, to think about how we build a religious community together. And I remember being really impacted by that. And it pushed me towards then going to Israel on a gap year with Nativ, USY, and the conservative movement's gap year program, and impelled me then to work for USY early in my career, and then to eventually go to rabbinical school, and then to build a startup congregation outside Washington, D.C. At every stage of my sort of not just career, but life, I really have felt a sense of God's presence in the work of building a community. And it's something that I've tried to get my partners to do, my congregants, my colleagues, to be open to the idea that it's not just about building an institution, but it's the spiritual transformation, the sense of God's presence that we're trying to create. And I will say that actually, that's one of the challenges that I think our movement needs to address, is we often get very focused on our institutions, on our synagogues, on USCJ, on the Rabbinical Assembly, on, there are a list of 23 other organizations, and we kind of forget that behind that work, behind those institutions needs to be a focus on people and on impact. How are we bringing people together in community, and how are we helping them to find God's presence in their lives, find meaning and purpose, whatever that may mean for them? I sense it here at Temple Israel. I've met wonderful, wonderful people, wonderful leaders. The fact that we are here, that coming to Shul got you out of bed in the morning to come here, means that there is a sense of yearning for one another's presence and therefore a sense of God's presence. I'll share one other idea that frames this for me. When Rabbi Stecker and I were studying at the Hartman Institute, we had the privilege of studying with Rabbi Daniel Hartman, who is today the president of the institution, who wrote a wonderful book called Putting God Second. I was taken just by the title. What does he mean? What does Rabbi Hartman mean by putting God second? He says what God actually wants is for us to put people first. When we put God first, we end up overshooting the goal. When we put people first, made in God's image, then we're able to encounter God. It's a really interesting irony, and I think about it all the time. When we put institutions first, we also overshoot the goal. We forget the impact and the transformation, the meaning that we're trying to seek. We forget what it means to look and think about what people need rather than what the institution needs. If we think about the impact we want to have on the people in our community, our synagogues will thrive. If we think about what our synagogues need, they don't always thrive. Again, an interesting irony. So I want us to think about this phrase, Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. I want us to think about what that means. To say we're going to build a mikdash, a holy space, but we're going to do it for the sake of the people for whom God will dwell among us. It's so interesting, the verse itself, God is saying, like, don't build it for me. Build it because I want to be in relationship with you. That's what I want. It's not that I need the house. I don't get wet when it rains. I don't get hot when it's sunny out. What I want is to be in relationship. I want to be with you. I want you to feel transformed through my presence, says God. Not about me. It's about you. And that's the space that I think we should be in individually. It's not about me. It's about you. And that's where we should be institutionally as a movement. It's not about us. It's about people that we want to bring together in community, in love, in care, in relationship, in Torah. So with that, I thank you for your warm hospitality. It's so wonderful to be here. I thank each of you who are helping to build this place, and I wish us the blessing of God's presence and care. Shabbat Shalom.